Well, hi everyone, and greetings from Northern Michigan. This is Bob the Science Guy. You know, I was going to do the collimation of the telescope today, but I thought maybe we'd do something a little bit more exciting. I went out and tested it the other day and took some shots of the moon. You see the movie right behind me. And I thought maybe I'd point out some of the features of the moon so that when you looked up at it, you could identify the parts of it. So let's cue up the music and get going. Now, when you look at the moon, you can identify several features right away. The dark areas are the seas, and the lighter areas are generally mountain ranges, and they're called the highlands. And then, of course, you see all these craters. Now, many people talk about the man in the moon. In China and the Eastern world, they talk about the rabbit in the moon, and that's what I'm going to do today. The part of the moon that we can see right now looks like the head of a rabbit. Here's the snout. Here's the top of the head. Here's the back ear. And here's the front ear. And apparently he's thinking about something. So this is a really nice way to understand the different seas of the moon. Now, the obvious feature that you can see is this round sea right up here. This is the Sea of Crisis. And that's very easy to spot, and it's a good place to kind of get yourself oriented. It's in the northeastern limb of the moon. Now down here in the head of the rabbit, or specifically the snout of the rabbit, this is called the Sea of Serenity. Here, at the top of the head of the rabbit, is the Sea of Tranquility. And then rabbits being rabbits, this is the Sea of Fertility. And to get you in the mood, this is the Sea of Nectar. And then finally, he's worried because this is the Sea of Crisis. Now, the Sea of Tranquility is actually quite famous because Apollo 11 landed about right here. Apollo 17 landed up in this general area. Now, of course, many of you are familiar with Google Earth. We use it almost on a daily basis. However, Google Earth is more than just the Earth. Let me show you what I mean. If we come up here to View, we can come down to something called Explore. And over here, we can pull up the Earth, which is what's up right now. This would be a good planetarium type program. We can look at Mars, and most importantly for our purposes today, we can have a look at the moon. And there it is. Now, just for fun, let's see if we can identify a few of these craters. Now, here are the ears of the rabbit, and this back ear is the Sea of Nectar. So I see a nice big crater with a bright dot in the center of it. That must be an upheaval mountain in the middle of the crater, right there. And I see another crater down here. Let's go over to Google Earth and see what we can do with that. And here we are. Here's a nice full moon. Now, the only problem with this is that this is looking at the moon when it's full, which means the light is going straight down on it. It's very difficult to pick out craters and such. So let's see if we can get ourselves oriented a little bit. Now, for example, here's the Sea of Nectar. And here is that one little crater with the upheaval in the middle of it. Let's have a little closer look at it. This crater is called Theophilus, and there's a mountain in the center of it. That had to do with the impact, and as the meteor or the asteroid smashed into the moon and liquefied it, a drop of it came up in the middle, and this is a pretty common feature of larger craters. And the other one that we wanted to see is this guy right down here. So let's see who he is. That's called Fracastorus. At least I think that's how they pronounce it. But you see how you can identify craters on the moon very nicely. Now let's go back to our QuickTime video. And we'll put it back in motion for a minute. This is the actual speed of the moon through a telescope. And you'll see that I'm not tracking the moon, but it is kind of moving down towards the lower right because my telescope wasn't polar aligned properly. And it does drift down a little bit. And here I'm making an adjustment. But as you can see, once you have it properly polar aligned, you just have to change that right ascension wheel and it'll keep it right in the center. Now, thanks to the generosity of the Patreons of this channel, I'm getting a computerized mount for my telescope, and I'll be able to do some really good tracking of not only the moon, but the planets and other objects in the sky. And that will be a big enhancement for this channel, because we're going to be doing a lot of this astrophotography. Here's the one crater that we identified, Theophilus. And here's Fracastard. Have a look at these mountain ranges right up here. These are pretty intense. Some of these are up to 3 kilometers high. Now, just a little bit of terminology. The part of the moon that you can see in a partial moon is called the light limb. The part that is in darkness is called the dark limb. And the line separating the two of them is called the terminator line. East on the moon is towards the Sea of Crisis. So this is the eastern side of the moon. The western side of the moon is by Grimaldi. This is the north, and this is the south. This is called the northeastern limb, southeastern limb, southwestern limb, and northwestern limb. Now, we only see about 40% of the moon at any one time, because the moon is a large object and it's relatively close to the Earth. But due to this phenomenon called lunar librations, we see different parts of the moon as the moon kind of rolls around in its orbit. We see up to about 51% of the moon over the course of the month. We never see the far side of the moon, at least not from Earth, because the moon itself is tidally locked to us. I don't know about you guys, but I think this is kind of mesmerizing to watch this. Now, one thing that's kind of interesting is if you look out in the east side of the moon where the sunlight is most directly from above, you don't see a lot of features and craters out in this area. But when you get the tangential light near the terminator line, those craters really stand out. As a matter of fact, if you look at this one, you can actually see the shadow of the rim. Same thing right here in Tycho. You can clearly see this is a very deep, round crater. And there's a shadow from this eastern wall of the crater onto the floor, and only the western rim is lit up. So if you want to look at craters, you don't want to look at a full moon. You want to look at a partial moon, and you want to look along the terminator line. A lot of people who get telescopes seem to think that they need to wait until the full moon to look at it, and that's really not the case. In fact, it's actually so bright when it's full, it hurts your eyes to look at it unless you have a filter on your telescope. If you want to see a lot of detail, you want to get a partial phase of the moon and look along the terminator line. Now, the moon is very, very bright in the night sky when it's full. It really drowns out the other stars. So when the moon's out, I generally look at the moon. I can also see Jupiter and Saturn and Venus. They're quite bright as well, and it's pretty obvious to be able to pick them out. Now, I haven't put out any videos of Jupiter because the focus on my telescope is not really very good. It's very coarse focus, and I haven't really gotten some good bands in Jupiter yet, although it looks like a marble in my telescope, and I can clearly see the 4 Galilean moons. So stay tuned for more on that. Now, Saturn, I can clearly make out the ring, and I can see the gap between the primary rings. But unfortunately, Saturn is really quite small in my telescope, and that'll be for another day, I think. This is just a short video on what I've been doing with the telescope. We're going to be looking at the moon a little bit more as it becomes more and more full during the month. See the other seas. We've got a whole another half of the moon to have a look at. And then we're going to have a look at some of the craters and other features. Now, thanks to the generosity of the Patreons of this channel and Bob the Science Guy, I do have a computerized telescope mount coming that's going to allow me to get some absolutely amazing videos. Now, our next episode is going to be on the collimation of a Newtonian telescope. This is just one of those things that you've got to know how to do in order to get good visualization with a telescope. It's an involved process, but it really isn't all that bad, and I'm just going to go through it from start to finish, and hopefully you'll enjoy that. We'll see you again on Thursday. Take care, guys.